I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 147 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Before we begin, I would like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio feedback incidents, to protect the safety of our interpreters, and to protect the health and safety of all participants. You will also notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video to your colleagues. So I don't think we have time for that because we just started. So today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Before speaking, please wait until the chair recognizes you. Members need to put their hands up in person or on Zoom and wait to be recognized once again by the chair, and we will do our best, myself and the clerk, to recognize you in the order that you put your hands up. So we confirm that all the witnesses have completed their required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, September 18, 2024, the committee shall resume its study of the protection of freedom of expression. I'd like to start by welcoming our witnesses. We have two witnesses with us today. First, the Honourable Christopher Wells, Senator from Alberta. Mr. Wells, hello. And we also have Mr. Jacques Marcoux from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, Director of Research and Analytics, who is joining by video conference. So before giving you the floor, Senator Wells, I would like to ask members of the committee, because we need to talk about the instructions that we will give our analysts for the drafting of the report for this study. I think you would have seen that today's meeting is only going to be 1 hour so that we can hear from our witnesses that we have today. So I believe that there will be general agreement that the drafting instructions could be sent to the analyst by email. Is there any objection to that? Because we already did that for the previous study on the CBC. So as I was talking to the analysts, I came to understand that the instructions should be sent by Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday end of day. Is that okay for everyone? Great. Okay, I don't see anyone who disagrees, so we can go ahead and start with the opening remarks of our witnesses. We will start with the Honourable Senator, Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, you have 5 minutes. Towards the end of your 5 minutes, I will give you a sign, and that will mean that you will have some seconds to wrap up.
Great. We're ready to go? Thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today as part of your study examining the protection of the freedom of expression in Canadian society. I've been following your deliberations with great interest. In my brief time with you today, I'd like to share with you a recent illustrative case study which highlights many of the issues you've been studying in relation to the rights and responsibilities related to the freedom of expression, the impacts of discrimination, and the consequences to community safety, well-being, and inclusion. The case study highlights a concerning and increasing rise in hatred directed towards the 2S LGBTQIA+ community and the City of Calgary's Safe and Inclusive Access Bylaw, passed in 2023, which is designed to create safe and inclusive access to city libraries and recreational facilities, which have become frequent targets for anti-2S LGBTQIA+ protests against drag queen or rainbow storytime events and gender-inclusive recreational facilities. The City of Calgary's General Manager of Community Services has indicated that 21 planned protests targeted the Calgary community, with a dozen focused on public libraries and recreational facilities. Several planned events at these locations had to be cancelled out of the concern for participant safety. The main focus of the City of Calgary's bylaw stipulates that a person, one, may not engage in protest activities on publicly accessible property within 100 meters of an entrance to a recreation facility or library, and two, may not impede or attempt to impede access to or from an entrance, and three, this prohibition is enforced 1 hour before and 1 hour after normal operating hours or differing hours for special events. So the legality of this bylaw was very recently challenged in the Alberta Court of Justice in response to a bylaw infraction ticket issued to an accused on April 15, 2023, who engaged in a protest at the Calgary Public Library's Reading with Royalty drag storytime event and was found to be within 100 meters of the library entrance. So the accused used a bullhorn to amplify his voice and displayed a sign stating, "Transgenders are perverts," and had previously stated that such events are used to groom, exploit, or traffic children. The accused also admitted to conducting similar protests at other libraries, but was deemed to be outside the 100-meter no protest zone and was not charged with a bylaw infraction in those instances. So in the accused's statement of defense, he makes several claims to the legal authority and validity of the city bylaw, which include his belief the bylaw violates sections 2A, 2B, 2C, and section 7 of the charter. The city conceded the bylaw violated section 2A and 2B, but denied any violation of 2C or section 7. Because of my limited time here with you today, I'll focus my comments on whether the bylaw was found to be in violation of section 2B and the accused freedom of expression. Ultimately, the court found the bylaw did violate section 2B, but was saved under section 1 as a reasonable limitation on the accused freedom of expression, based on similar legal precedents such as exclusion or bubble zones that have been established to support access to abortion services and ruled to be legal by the Supreme Court of British Columbia and twice more by the BC Court of Appeal. At this point, I should identify that before I was appointed to the Senate of Canada, the City of Calgary had tenured me to produce an expert report in my capacity as the Canada Research Chair for the Public Understanding of Sexual and Gender Minority Youth. As summarized in the court decision, my expert report provided evidence that, quote, exposure to anti-2S LGBTQIA+ speech, signage, messaging, etc., outside of public facilities, such as libraries and recreation facilities, pools, can have a detrimental impact, which include A, increased hypervigilance and minority stress, B, compromised mental and physical health, C, invalidation of 2S LGBTQIA+ identities and communities, D, contribution to post-traumatic stress and other negative coping mechanisms, E, distrust of law enforcement, government, and civic institutions, and F, avoidance of public spaces, recreation, community facilities, programs, events, and support due to fears of anticipatory prejudice, violence, intimidation, discrimination, and G, an erosion of sense of belonging, community connectedness, and social cohesion. So on November 26, 2024, Honorable Justice Barley stated in his decision, the City of Calgary's Safe and Inclusive Access bylaw addresses a valid and important social issue, and the community could suffer significant psychological harm if subjected to protesters objecting to their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Sénateur, je vais devoir vous demander encore peut-être 10
Senator, I will have to ask you to wrap up in the next 10 seconds. Your 5 minutes are up.
It's always amazing how quickly time goes when you're the witness, as opposed to being on the committee. So ultimately, what they found was that the bylaw was a reasonable limitation on the freedom of expression because of the potential for harm, reducing opportunity for conflict and escalation at these events. And I'd be happy to answer questions related to that. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, sénateur. On va souhaiter la bienvenue maintenant à M. Jacques Marcoux, qui est le directeur de la recherche et de l'analyse au Centre canadien de protection de l'enfance.
Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Jacques Marcoux. Welcome to the committee. It's your turn. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this study. My name is Jacques Marcoux. I'm the Director of Research with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. We are a registered charity that has been operating for nearly 40 years. We operate cybertip.ca, which is Canada's national tip line for the public reporting of online child sexual abuse and exploitation. When you read in the news about the thousands of online sextortion and luring cases across the country, in many of those cases, we were the first point of contact for these kids. And I also want to note that our organization is viewed internationally as a world leader in the discovery, identification, and the issuance of takedown notices for child sexual abuse material all across the internet. We do this through the deployment of a number of technological tools built by our organization. over the years. It's a platform we call Project Arachnid. And just for a sense of scale for the committee, on any given day, we issue anywhere between 2,000 to 20,000 takedown notices to hundreds of online service providers across dozens of countries. So we have, quite frankly, seen it all. So I want to really emphasize that the perspective I'm here to share today is really grounded in this reality that a lot of Canadians, thousands of Canadians, experience online. And this isn't hypothetical, this isn't philosophical, this is real, and it happens on mainstream services that all of us use. So with that said, it may not be clear exactly how our work connects to freedom of expression, so I want to provide a couple of examples. So first, it's important to know that in our space, we especially focus on expression in the form of images and videos. So this includes expression that is criminal, but also expression that is often referred to as lawful but awful. This, for example, could include images of kids in highly sexualized poses, or even the spread of images or information that's used to dox them. We proactively seek the removal of this content online, and we routinely encounter resistance and even outright denials from online services. We also know from our work with survivors who are on the receiving end of this so-called expression that it has an incredible chilling effect on their ability to participate in online life. In fact, part of the services we provide, the supports we provide to these individuals, is assistance to help them dramatically limit their online footprint for the sake of their personal safety on the internet. So we also work with victims who spend their lives trying to stop the spread of images of their abuse or their personal information across the internet. So if you consider that the person who has disseminated this content essentially does this with zero friction in the exercise of their expression, and it's often done anonymously. So with a few clicks, that content of these victims goes online, and it can be downloaded thousands of times with potentially infinite online reach. But for the victims, it's just a minefield of barriers, and they are often asked by service providers to prove it or to provide ID in order to get anything taken down. So when they go to police, what they often discover is there's little that can be done, and sometimes that's because the content is technically lawful. So these challenges, as you can imagine, are exactly why we support, as an organization, online safety type regulations, measures that ensure that the systems themselves that act as these vehicles for our expression have obligations to, for example, anticipate and plan, and especially design their services in ways that limit predictable harms and foster healthy environments. So it's not simply enough to act once the harm is done. And some examples of ways operators can protect and enhance free expression includes really basic concepts like providing users with reporting tools, blocking bots that artificially amplify, I'll call it inauthentic expression, eliminating problematic algorithmic incentives, and of course, stringent rules for the swift removal of illegal content such as child sexual abuse imagery. So this list could go on, but I think it's important to recognize that a lot of these core principles behind this list are simply borrowed from all the other industries in Canada that are subject to regulation.
30 secondes, Monsieur Marcoux.
So if I can leave you with one core thought, it's this. The digital spaces we all use to express ourselves are very often undeservedly characterized as these altruistic public squares of free expression, when in reality, these environments are commercial entities and they're designed to drive engagement and traffic at all costs and with little regard for the public interest or the rights of its users. And so for the government, a decision to not intervene is in and of itself an action that has dramatic impact on free expression. So the alternative to intervention is simply to roll the dice and hope that foreign companies voluntarily prioritize the rights of Canadians over their objectives, which may be commercial, political, or otherwise. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Marcoux. On arrive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marcoux. So we are now going to start the first round of questions. I suggest that we do 2 rounds of questions for our witnesses. So the first round will be a 6-minute round for each of the political parties. For the Conservatives, Mr. Couric, you have the floor, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just a note, I have a question, and then I'll be passing my time over to Mr. Giovanni. Mr. Wells, do you know three individuals by the name of Pam Davidson, Erica Barudis, and Mikhailo, it's a Ukrainian name, Martinyuk?
Personally? Or do I?
Do you know who they are?
I know they're Albertans.
Do you know the position to which they hold?
I do not.
They were elected as senators in waiting in the province of Alberta. Do you acknowledge that Albertans have a history, a tradition, and under various federal governments have been appointed, honoring the will, the democratic will of Albertans, that prime ministers have appointed democratically elected senators to the Senate of Canada?
I'm not quite sure how that relates to my testimony here today or the topic of the committee, but
So with respect, I think it speaks very well to the.
On a rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
There's a point of order, Chair.
Right.
Chair, this is actually a point of order because that question has nothing to do with the freedom of expression study that we're doing right now.
Je vous entends, Dr.
I hear you, Dr. Fry. We have some latitude, as you yourself have said at numerous occasions when you were in the chair, but we will let Mr. Kurek finish his introduction, and hopefully he will tie this to the study topic. So, Mr. Kurek, if you can make it relevant to the study topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would note that Ms. Fry just referenced that Albertans shouldn't be free to express their democratic will and who represents them in Canada's Senate.
Point
so I would
order,
simply say,
Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Point of order,
that
Mr.
when
Chair.
it comes to the will, the
Point of order,
democratic
Mr.
will
Chair.
of Alberta,
Point of order.
Monsieur Kurek,
directly.
Monsieur Kurek, j'ai une pluie de rappel au règlement.
Mr. Kurek, we have multiple points of order. Just a second, Mr. Noor Mohammed, and then we will have to go to Dr. Fry. Mr. Chair, it's clear that we've decided to go ahead with this theater of the absurd today, but this is a serious study. But having a member of the committee misrepresented what another member of the committee has said. So they're making it sound like she said something she did not. So it's not fair, and it's not the approach we take in this committee. Mr. Kurek, I will ask that you bring your line of questioning to into relevance with the theme of the study, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate.
Apologies, Mr. Kurek. Yes, Ms. Fry, go ahead.
The point of privilege is that the honourable member has actually attributed things to me that I never said. So I would like him to apologize for putting words in my mouth and misrepresenting my statement.
Monsieur Kurek.
Mr. Kurek, you have heard the request by Ms. Fry.
On the point of order, Mr. Chair, Madam Dr. Fry had said that this was not related to this ongoing study on freedom of expression. Well, I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, that the ability for Albertans to express their democratic will by electing senators is absolutely in line with freedom of expression and the assured ability that Albertans in this case specifically have to exercise that freedom of expression. So if she didn't mean that, then I am happy to retract. But in her suggesting that somehow this isn't relevant to the study, I would suggest emphasizes the exact point that I was making.
Mr. Chair, I would like to
Madame,
respond
Dr. Fry, s'il vous plaît, vous êtes...
Dr. Fry, please. Wait. Go ahead.
Point of...
Chair, the ability to interpret what someone said, despite the fact that I never use the language the member attributed to me, is really unfair, and it's totally the kind of thing that we've come to expect from the Conservative Party. They actually misrepresent what people say. They treat others with totally different.
Madame la Présidente, là, je pense qu'on
I
est, vous allez reconnaître, Madame la Présidente. Madame Fry, je pense qu'on devient, on est dans...
Dr. Fry, I think that is going into debate now, so I will bring everyone back to order. Mr. Kurek clearly said that if he has misinterpreted your words, then he would be happy to retract. So if you'll allow us, we'll come back to Mr. Kurek's question. So I'll just let you know that please stick to the theme of this study and please stick to the opening remarks of Senator Wells. So I think you have about 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Wells was asked to appear here not simply as an expert in his previous field of work, but was asked to appear at this committee as a senator. So it directly relates to the relevance of and highlights the fake appointment process and the fake the fake reforms that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has brought forward to the Senate that truly are not only fake in terms of what they were said to accomplish, but directly relate to taking away the ability of Albertans to express themselves freely and to have their representatives doing the work that Albertans would expect them to do in our Senate. Mr. Chair, I would cede my time to Mr. Giovanni.
3 minutes, Monsieur Giovanni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
3 minutes, Mr. Giovanni.
I'd like to direct some questions to our witness, Mr. Marcoux. First off, Mr. Marcoux, are you familiar with Bill C-412, which is being considered in relation to a lot of the issues that you've raised in your opening statement today?
Yes, I am.
One of the points of debate, and certainly I think a lot of the issues you raised, sir, are concerns shared by many of us. One of the points of debate between Bill C-63 and Bill C-412 is whether the existing laws and frameworks in our country can be updated and strengthened to respond to your concerns, which is a primary objective of C-412, compared to Bill C-63, which is focused largely on building a $200 million bureaucracy and asking the Canadian public to trust that bureaucracy to accomplish the objectives that I believe you are sincerely interested in. So I'm wondering if you could maybe comment on whether you believe C-412 is an adequate response to many of your concerns, and if not, why you would prefer Bill C-63's highly bureaucratic, longer-term response to issues that people are looking for urgent action to.
Thanks for the question. When we've been calling for government regulation on the social media and tech space for years, and when we look at the landscape of what other countries are doing, certainly we can pick and choose components of what's going on in Australia, in the UK, in the EU, in the US, and cobble together what we think would be an ideal piece of legislation. There's also components within C-412 that are very interesting. The thing, though, is that, and I addressed this in my opening remarks, is that there's a perception that we have the required laws on the books currently, and oftentimes people will point to the criminal code and say, well, a lot of these things are illegal. But what we see when we deal with kids is that a lot of the harm doesn't necessarily reach a criminal threshold. And even if it did, our strategy can't be to wait till the crime has occurred and then try and respond. I think ideally, and this is how I think we treat a lot of areas in Canadian society, is to anticipate what those harms are at the system level and try and get ahead of them so that
Mr. Marcoux,
we're
low on time, and I do hope you'll get to continue your thoughts into future questions. What I would just leave you with, though, is I still think that the current Liberal government and the supporters of Bill C-63 still have yet to make a convincing argument to the majority of the public that a $200 million bureaucracy is the appropriate response to your concerns. And I think that's a challenge that we put forward to them, and they continue to fail to meet regularly.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Giovanni.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni. Now we will go to the Liberal Party and a member of our committee who's going to take the floor. Dr. Fry, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to the Chair, Mr. Champoux. I want to thank the witnesses for coming, and I would like to thank them for taking the time to discuss the broad framework of freedom of expression, which is more than freedom of speech. And in fact, my last colleague asked a question about Bill C-63, and I want to go back to that question in a way that says that, I know that the Conservatives do not approve of Bill C-63. They call it a $200 million censorship bureaucracy. But the bottom line is that the criminal code changes are not enough to stop this kind of online harm. And we know that, in fact, taking down, which the Conservatives also oppose, taking down harmful content which can stay online for years afterwards is something that they disapprove of. Can you elaborate on why it's necessary to do more than the criminal code and why it is necessary to remove offensive content online, as Bill C-63 proposes to do? Thank you.
Well, so the space that we work in is a challenging one in that a lot of the content that we look at is fundamentally illegal, or the spaces we go looking for it are perhaps illegal for others to research. And so there's actually a quite narrow group of people in the world who have kind of done a deep dive into these spaces and have a really good understanding of what's happening. And I think that if average Canadians, or any Canadian for that matter, were to wrap their heads around the things that we see in the way that online spaces are weaponized against kids, I think it would be incredibly shocking, and most people would set off alarm bells for just about everyone. But I keep circling back to this notion of lawful but harmful. And this is a really sticky and murky and challenging space for us. When we issue takedown notices for content that is unambiguously illegal, like child sexual abuse, we get pretty good compliance with major service providers. We get really bad compliance sometimes with service providers that are located in Eastern Europe or somewhere in Eastern Asia. But with the harmful, abusive, as we call it, or lawful but awful, you get a lot of pushback. And so you can't necessarily go to a police officer and say, this happened to me, because the content itself doesn't necessarily rise to the mandate of a police officer or even the justice system. So you need other mechanisms in place.
Thank you, Mr. Marcoux. I have very little time to ask my question, so I'm just trying to get another question in. And my question is for Senator Wells. Senator, I think we are well aware that governments are trying to prevent freedom of expression of LGBTQ, especially transvestites and trans persons who are from using their pronouns and from presenting themselves as they truly are. Now, what kind of harm happens to LGBTQ communities, drag queens, and trans children especially, when they are forbidden from expressing themselves? What are the physical, psychological harms that occur to them?
Thank you for the question. I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about the harms directed towards the 2S LGBTQ plus community. I think we see a lot of what we can talk about the impacts of mental health, distress, but also what does it fundamentally mean to be denied the right to identity, to bodily autonomy. Impacts often turn to negative coping mechanisms. We know we have increased rates of depression, anxiety, negative coping mechanisms like turning to drugs and alcohol, or increased suicide ideation. As well. So we know that, for example, just gender affirmation, whether that happens at home, within your faith community, at school, or through the healthcare system, helps to improve mental health, well-being, makes you feel part of the community around you.
And one last question, Mr. Chair, do I have time?
Vous avez encore 1 minute et demie.
You still have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because denying, for instance, trans children the access to puberty inhibitors, I just wanted to know if that is a denial of the right to health care.
Denial
of the right to autonomy of the person?
It's fundamentally a violation of their human rights and their right to self-expression, to freedom of expression. Access to gender affirmative care is a human right and is a part of our healthcare system.
And we know that physicians have said that, in fact, it is very scientifically appropriate and clinically appropriate to give, hormone replacement therapy to these kids. And if you deny them by law, what are you doing to their charter rights?
Yeah, you're absolutely violating their charter rights. There is a strong consensus in Canada by all medical associations and many professional associations that gender affirmative health care is medically necessary, is evidence-based, and is the right of individuals and the right of physicians to provide that care.
Thank you very much, Senator. And thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to finish my questions. Thank you.
Madame Fry, vous aviez 2 secondes.
Madam Fry, you had 2 seconds, so congratulations on doing it right on the clock. So normally it would be the Bloc Québécois' turn, so my turn to ask questions, but as I'm sitting in the chair today, I will give myself the chance to ask a couple of questions after the turns of all parties. Now we are going to go to the NDP. Ms. Ashton, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Okay, hello, and thank you very much to our witnesses for joining us here today. Senator Wells, we recently had a witness, Faye Johnstone, appear before this committee to discuss what we in the NDP view the reasonable limits to freedom of expression, which is when it bleeds over into hate speech. During her presentation, she talked about the organized hate campaign she has had to deal with, which included publishing her personal information, aggressive harassment by pretend journalists at Rebel News, and the pylon led by far-right hate mongers. She asked in this committee, what happens in a country when instead of bringing people together, we normalize division and difference, with even the leader of Canada's Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, fanning the flames of conspiracy? So my question to you is, what happens when that happens?
Well, I think ultimately it sends a message that people are not welcome within their communities. They should be afraid or have to deny who they are to be able to access publicly available services and supports. But ultimately it sends a message that Canada is not a welcoming and inclusive country.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to focus a bit on the Alberta experience because, well, you certainly allude to it, and many of us are very concerned about what's happening there. We've seen that in Alberta, the extent to which hate mongers who want to play politics with people's lives, how dangerous that can be when they get into power. The reality is, if you're willing to demonize an entire community to garner votes, you have no business representing anyone. The Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, has made demonizing the trans community a core part of her governing agenda. It is one of the most backwards and hateful government agendas we've seen in a long time. Many Albertans are watching Danielle Smith and feeling scared for their future. Trans children already face discrimination. They don't need a premier to pile on, and certainly leaders like Pierre Poilievre to back them into it. As a previous witness to this committee, Faye Johnstone eloquently said, we need moral leadership from our politicians, from our political party leaders to actually choose to unite Canadians to protect these fundamental rights. Can you describe how Premier Danielle Smith, with the full support of leaders like Pierre Poilievre, is demonizing trans youth and what that means for children and families in your province?
Well, first I would say the 3 bills that passed in Alberta targeting the 2S LGBT community, in particular youth, who are unprecedented and represent a dangerous trend that we're seeing in Canada, which is a lot of this is being imported from the far right in the United States and countries like Russia and their promotion of homosexuality or their anti-don't say gay laws. It's very disturbing. It's caused extreme distress and concern in the community. And I think that's why you've seen immediately court challenges be issued, because fundamentally these laws are a violation of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and of human rights grounds, which exist in every province and territory in this country. That includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. You know, we would expect that government policy would help and support young people, not hurt them.
Just in the final time that remains, I'm wondering, obviously the goal of this study is to come up with recommendations to government in terms of dealing with the threats to freedom of expression. And as I said, for us in the NDP, what's critical is to put a stop to hate, including anti-trans hate. I'm wondering if you have some clear recommendations to make to the federal government on this front.
Thank you for that question. The example that I provided from the City of Calgary, the Safe and Inclusive Access Bylaw, Vaughan, the City of Vaughan also has a very strong bylaw that protects things like what's called social infrastructure, so hospitals, schools, libraries, recreational facilities from protest. I think this is very, as the courts have also agreed, a very reasonable limitation on the freedom of expression, still allowing people to express even hateful or awful views, but also to protect citizens to be able to access public spaces and services just like everyone else. So my recommendation would be for this committee to look at scaling up those efforts of those bylaws as a best practice, encouraging more municipalities to enact them, but also provincial governments do have the power, and certainly the federal government also has the power to enact this kind of safe access, safe infrastructure laws and legislation.
Thank you for sharing that. And just quickly, do you think we need stronger federal laws when it comes to anti-trans hate in particular?
You know, absolutely, particularly the hate crimes provisions that are in Bill C-63. I understand that the minister is considering splitting that bill. I really believe that those hate crimes provisions, which all law enforcement widely support, need to be in the bill, and will do a good help combat hate in this country by having stronger legislation in the criminal code.
30 seconds.
Much for what you've shared, and we're looking forward to a second round. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ashton. So quickly, Mr. Marcoux, I'd like to ask you a question about the exposure of young people to harmful content online. I am the father of 2 young adolescents, and I am mindful about the content that they're consuming on social networks and online in general, and this impacts on the way they speak, the way they behave. So there's offensive content, and there's also extremely rough and harmful content with harmful effects. So there are many ways of preventing this. There is the hard method that is used by Australia, who banned the use of social media for those under 16. So, but the implementation brings up many questions. But what's your take on that? What kind of actions can be taken here which we could implement, which would help us prevent the access of young people, adolescents especially, to violent content, sexual content, but also all kinds of harmful influences on their development and their attitudes in general? Thank you for the question, Mr. Shampoo.
The example of Australia. So Australia set the tone with age 16, which is beyond what most countries are doing. And if you think of that, that's actually a bit of a response due to the exasperation of families and regulators and government and everyone to protect their kids online. So in the context where online service providers haven't really shown an interest to step up to the plate and to do what's right and to prioritize kids, what other option do governments like Australia or our own government have? And so if we had a situation where the industry was taking seriously this issue and was taking appropriate steps, or wouldn't fight tooth and nail every attempt to be subject to reasonable regulation, then we wouldn't be in this situation. If it was, and I think I'll just end there.
Merci. Mais en fait,
Thank you. But I haven't heard proposals or concrete action steps. I mean, can you force the web giants to do their part? Because at the end of the day, the key is in their hands, as it were, to restrict access or to control the content or to introduce other measures. I mean, the problem is in their court due to the regulation.
In principle aims to do. It's to establish regulations on the system itself and to impose duties of care onto those companies. So things like age verification potentially, which is something that has been supported by some parties, and that would allow websites, platforms to provide age-appropriate experiences to kids, would be one example of something that could be done. So Bill C-63 is an example where we're trying to establish, the government's trying to establish a systems approach, and it's a similar approach to what's happening in the UK already, and in Australia and in the EU.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Marcoux. On passe au...
Thank you very much, Mr. Marcoux. Now we're going to start the second round of questions. It's a round of 5 minutes for the Conservatives. And Mr. Giovanni, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marcoux, I do have another question for you, and it's sort of just to give you some context. Like, for the last couple of meetings, we've heard some rather bizarre ideas from Ms. Fry, today suggesting that freedom of expression is irrelevant to democracy, and at our last meeting suggesting that freedom of expression is irrelevant to the expansion of the federal bureaucracy and the administrative state. So I do want to focus on that because I think it's important we speak to the concerns of Canadians. It sounds to me, Mr. Marcoux, that you are concerned about... that was a little longer than I expected.
Madame Fry, est-ce que c'est un rappel au...
Ms. Fry, do you have a point of order or a question of privilege?
A point of privilege. Thank you very much. Chair, I am prepared to have the Conservatives disagree with what I say and do. I have not, for the last few meetings, had any. I was sharing. I was not asking questions of people.
Point of order.
To please get a sense that I am being misquoted here, misrepresented, and I would like, my privilege as a parliamentarian has been, sullied, and I would like the member to apologize for misinterpreting and misspeaking about everything I've said so far today. Thank you.
Point of order. Monsieur Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni, Ms. Fry, Madam Fry has a point of privilege.
Be apologizing. Maybe Ms. Fry forgot, but these are recorded meetings, so there's video of her saying the outrageous things that I made reference to. So she could go back and look at the video if she'd like. But I don't have the memory of a goldfish. I remember what happened on Monday. Okay, if I can go back now. Mr. Marcoux.
Monsieur Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni, we will finish this point before we will let you continue. We'll briefly suspend for about 30 seconds to have a conversation with the clerk. Mr. Giovanni, we are not able to review what was said. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Can you just let me finish? So we'll resume. We'll just ask that you are a bit more careful.
Une alerte. Ouais, ça va. Non, c'est une alerte Amber. Ah, non.
It's an Amber Alert. So I will just ask you that you are a bit more careful when interpreting the words of the other members of the committee, and we'll be able to continue with your turn. But Mr. Godin had a point of order. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, listen, I am not a regular member of the committee here. I heard the usual chair say that my colleague is a liar. And it was a couple seconds ago, or it was the interpretation that was off. I did not hear about someone being called a liar or lies, but we cannot go back and listen to what has been said. But Mr. Chair, I'll finish. I think it's important to make sure that we are not treating each other as liars. Yes, you are right. Please try to use a respectful vocabulary.
Mr. Chair, and it's I would just note that there have been a number of times where the regular chair occupant of this
Madame Fry,
this
Monsieur
committee
Couric est en train
is
d'énoncer un rappel au règlement. Je vous demande d'attendre un petit peu, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Fry, Mr. Couric is elaborating on a point of order, please.
and with respect, I am speaking on a point of order, Dr. Fry. So with respect, Chair, the regular chair occupant has, on a number of occasions over a number of meetings, interrupted in some cases questions posed by the conservative members of this committee, and which is ironic when it's talking about a study on freedom of expression, but certainly I believe it is fully within the bounds of the discussion that we are having, the direction that Mr. Giovanni was taking, and if some members are unhappy with that, they are certainly
That's entering debate.
time to intervene in those regards.
Monsieur Couric, c'est du débat. J'ai bien pris note.
Mr. Couric, that's debate, but I duly noted. Ms. Fry, on that point of order.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I would comment on it, but that would be debate. I would comment on my ability as a chair to intervene when I think a line of questioning to a witness is disrespectful. It's my duty to make sure that happens. But I would like to point out that Mr. Giovanni mentioned what went on at a meeting that was in camera, and he's just breached the rules of in camera by doing so.
Merci, Madame Fry. C'est...
Thank you, Madam Fry. Mr. Giovanni, I will remind you that, yes, Monday, the meeting was in camera.
It happened last Wednesday when Ms. Fry had suggested that our public witness, Bruce Party, was making irrelevant comments in a discussion about the administrative state. That was last Wednesday, not on Monday. I did not address anything that was in camera. I appreciate that Ms. Fry wants to play a game here, but we're telling the truth about what she's been doing as chair of this committee.
Monsieur Giovanni, je vous arrête maintenant. On est...
Mr. Giovanni, we are turning this whole thing into a debate, and so far, Mr. Nur Mohammed, did you have a point of order? No? Okay, thank you. Mr. Giovanni, you have the floor, and you have the floor for another 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Marco, finally I get to ask you my question. Apologies for the delay. So back to the concerns many Canadians have about the creation of a massive bureaucracy through Bill C-63. I'd be curious if, other Canadians who share your concerns, your objectives concerning the protection of children, do you appreciate why they are not favorable toward Bill C-63's expansion of the bureaucracy? Do you see why there are concerns about that posing a threat to freedom of expression in our country? And would you be able to find common ground with Canadians who share your concerns related to the protection of children online, but do not appreciate the way that Bill C-63 proposes to go about it?
Thank you for your question. As an organization, our concern is what's effective, what an effective bill or what an effective law looks like, or what effective regulation looks like. The details as to whether or not it's appropriately funded, or this is the right structure, or it's best to hand this over to the CRTC, isn't really something that we're interested in weighing in on. What we want to see is a law that provides a system-wide safety net to kids, and quite frankly, any Canadian who uses these services. And we want to see this be rolled out and be effective. And we want to also catch up to the same protections that other kids in other countries currently have. And so that's really our chief concern at this time.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Marcoux. I'd like to see the rest of my time to my colleague, Mr. Couric.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marcoux, you're not in the room here, but we did have an Amber Alert actually that just rang, and I certainly pray that child is found soon, safely, and quickly. But it speaks to how live of an issue protecting kids is. And I know I spent some time at the Justice Committee discussing Bill C-270. A bill that would help with ensure that explicit material, there's that accountability for the distribution of non-consensual explicit material, and ensure that it is taken down, that there would be responsibility for both those who would share it and the companies that in some cases make it just incredibly difficult for victims, and it just heartbreaking stories. And I shared some of that testimony during my time at Justice. So here we are discussing freedom of expression. We have an Amber Alert which highlights how this is such a live issue. I'm wondering if you can comment specifically on Bill C-270, but to make sure that when it comes to protecting kids, that there is accountability for those who would share explicit material without consent, whether it be children or adults, maybe intimate partners or the like, and to ensure that there's accountability for both those who would share and the companies that have profited in many cases off of that material.
Mr. Kirk, just so I'm clear, Bill C-270, is that Mr. Vierson's private member's bill?
Yes.
Right. So I'm not incredibly familiar with the details of the bill, but I do know the broad strokes of the bill. And I think that is fundamentally a good example of working upstream and integrating a systems approach to protecting people online, where you impose obligations on service providers or anyone who wants to make available content to the general public, especially, I'll call it higher risk content like adult pornography. So a lot of those measures, and like I said, I'm not speaking to it specifically, just generically. Those are fundamentally things that as an organization, we agree are good approaches. Things like ensuring that any video that's put online, especially on a pornography site, is consensual, that the person not only consented to being recorded in the first place, but consented to it being distributed, and then also continues to provide consent for that to be distributed, as well as all the, I'll call it, the co-actors in the video, to ensure that everyone within the actual content has provided their consent. So I think those are fundamentally great ideas.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Couric. Ça fait...
Thank you very much, Mr. Couric. Your 5 minutes are up. Now going to the Liberals, Mr. Talib Nur Mohammed, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator, we began this conversation with conversation about the Senate. And so I think it's important to take a minute or two at the top to correct the record on some of the misleading information that was provided. As most Canadians with knowledge of the Constitution know, that senators are appointed by the Governor-General on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. Bert Brown, Ted Morton, Cliff Breitkrautz, and Link Byfield and Mike Sheik were all elected by Alberta voters and not appointed to the Senate by Stephen Harper, who appointed 59 senators, some of whom ended up in jail, some of whom ended up with all kinds of other questionable records of their own. Senator, have you ever been accused of any wrongdoing since your appointment to the Senate?
Certainly not. And I can say as someone new to the Senate, what remarkable colleagues I have and who come from all walks of life. and who bring their lived and professional experience to bear on issues that matter the most to Canadians, and work closely, of course, with the House of Commons to pass legislation that will meaningfully impact and improve the lives of Canadians.
And do you sit in do you belong to a political party?
I do not, and I currently sit as a non-affiliated senator.
Are there any political parties represented in the Senate?
I believe there's only one.
And what is that?
I believe that is the Conservative Party that sits with the Conservative Caucus.
So just to confirm, unelected Conservative senators sit in the Conservative Caucus along with Conservative colleagues in this room?
I believe that to be the case.
I see. Okay. Do you sit in any political caucuses with other parties in the House of Commons?
I do not. There are none.
Okay. So I think it's important for those that are watching this to understand that the only party that is actively engaged in partisan politics in the Senate with unelected senators is, in fact, the Conservative Party. With that now on the record, Senator, you spoke about the importance of making sure that kids have the ability to feel safe in their communities and in their schools. I've asked this of other witnesses, and I wonder if you might take a minute to answer. There's a lot of folks on the right who are triggered by the use of pronouns. I certainly don't give a damn what somebody's pronouns are. As long as I understand what they are, I'll use them. I don't particularly care one way or the other. Why do you think the right is so triggered by people's use of pronouns?
Well, I think when people are triggered, it says more about themselves and their own beliefs than the individuals who just simply want to be respected for who they are and how they identify. It just comes down to good Canadian values about common decency and respect for your neighbor, respect for your community.
You're from Alberta. It's a province that prides itself in talking about freedom. And every time I've gone to Alberta, I've been struck by the incredibly kind, wonderful people that I've had the chance to interact with from all political stripes. And they all are very keen on personal freedom. Why is it, then, that there are these right-wing elements that are so triggered or so opposed to the expression of personal freedoms by members of the LGBT community?
It's a great question. I was born and raised in Alberta, chose to stay in Alberta, work in Alberta, and I'm proud to represent Albertans, including those from the 2S LGBTQ+ community who are proud Albertans. And all they want is to be respected and have the same rights and freedoms and privileges as anyone else in this country. And so, it's very perplexing why it's freedom for me, but not freedom for thee.
So that's an interesting point, this freedom for thee, for me, but not for thee. And we've heard a lot of this. The thing that I really wonder if you could spend a little bit of time, I don't know how much time we have left, probably another minute or so.
Environ une minute.
A minute, is exactly this question about the notion of freedom and the freedom of expression. How do you reconcile this notion that conservatives and small C conservatives, perhaps less so, but certainly big C conservatives these days in your home province and perhaps other places, have taken on some of the most vulnerable in our communities, young people who are dealing with identity issues, with sexual orientation issues. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they're an easy target, or do you think it's because it certainly doesn't align with love thy neighbor? It certainly doesn't align with the values of love thy neighbor. So what do you think it is?
Well, I think we've seen around the world, in countries like Russia and in places like certain states in the United States where these people become political targets. It distracts from the real important issues to Canadians, like being able to afford food, worrying about housing, worrying about the kind of job that you're able to have or retain. These become distractions, unfortunately, that are aided and abetted by unregulated social media and algorithms that seek to divide Canadians. And when we're divided, we're then most vulnerable to foreign interference and foreign governments and agents, right? This is a clear kind of strategy to sow dissent, to rip apart the very fabric of our democracy, which is diversity, multicultural, and pluralism, which are the hallmarks of our country that every Canadian should be proud that we have in this country.
Merci, Sénateur, Monsieur Noor Mohamed.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Noor Mohamed, that was your time. Now we will go to Ms. Ashton. Nikki, you have 2.5 minutes. You have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to clarify, as many have raised the issue of the Senate. I just want to put on the record, since this has clearly become an issue in our an issue of discussion in our committee, that I'm proud of the NDP position that doesn't support an unelected Senate at all, I think that would be a solution to most of our most of our problems. If we're going to talk about strengthening democracy, there's lots to focus on, and fighting for the Senate isn't one of those things. Moving on to questions, Monsieur Marcoux. Again, the point of what we're doing here is to come up with recommendations. There's been a fair bit of focus around legislation, but I wanted to get into one issue that we also raised in the discussion around online harms that we had a few months ago, and that is the issue of gender-based violence. A lot of talk around child exploitation. Really points to the deep issues we face as a society with respect to gender-based violence. We know gender-based violence is on the rise. We are seeing an epidemic of femicides across the country, but we know for young women online, the online realm is one that poses immense risk and danger. I'm wondering if you could speak to how important it is to have a federally funded strategy to end gender-based violence, not just online, but in general, and to what extent do we need to take gender-based violence seriously as a way of also taking online harms and the safety of our children online seriously?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to stay in the online lane, if I may. That's really our area of expertise. And you're right. So there is definitely a gender component, a gender-based violence component to the online harm space. The majority of child sexual abuse material that we see, it's often young girls and women, and even young adults at times, with non-consensual intimate image distribution. There is a bit of a hiccup in that trend, in that recently online sextortion has kind of flipped that notion on its head, in that it's almost entirely boys for a number of reasons. It is primarily because the motivation isn't sexually driven, it's financially driven, where boys are falling prey to these sort of sexual conversations online, and then they're being extorted. So there's also that, a bit of a more recent nuance as well. But no, absolutely. This is the gender-based violence component, and it's also marginalized groups tend to be overrepresented in online harm. So I think it's really important that we have these systems in place, things like these sort of comprehensive approaches to tackling these issues before they become crimes or before there's harm that happens, because, and I've echoed this multiple times over the last hour, but this notion of a systems approach where we anticipate, at this point, after 20 years of social media, pretty easy to anticipate harms. We know what the tactics are, we know where the harms are, where the pitfalls are. Now it's just a matter of ensuring that those who control these digital environments are actually acting on this information.
Merci, M. Marcoux, Mme Ashton. On a dépassé largement le temps, mais je vais laisser M. Marcoux terminer sa réponse. Merci.
Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Marcoux, Senator Wells, thank you for being with us today and for your contributions and your answers to our questions, sometimes not so easy, those questions. I'd like to thank you very much. This was the last hour of the study on the freedom of expression, and I'd like to really take the time to thank all of our colleagues for having entertained this study, because this was very important for me, and we have collaborated really well on this, and we have reached the objective of finishing this study before the holiday break. So I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank the whole team, including our analysts. They will have another report to draft, so such a good way to spend Christmas. And Danielle, of course, our clerk, who is always indispensable. So thank you endlessly. If you have anything else to add, if not, I suggest that we adjourn. Meeting adjourned.